The two folders on the dining room table each had a name written on the tab: Leon, Randall. Diana looked at both of them, then looked around the table, and did not see her own name anywhere. Frank sat at the head of the table the way he always had, back straight, hands flat on either side of his coffee cup. Alma sat beside him with her fingers laced together in her lap. Leon was 43 and had driven down from his house across town that morning. His wife, Cassie, sat close to him with a legal notepad she hadn't written anything on yet. Randall was 40 and had come straight from his apartment with a cup of gas station coffee he kept circling his hands around. His wife, Kim, sat at the far end and barely looked up when Diana walked in. Howard Griggs, an attorney the family had used for decades, sat at the other end of the table with a briefcase open beside his chair. Diana was 36. She owned a floral design studio called Bloom and Gather on the east side of town, employed 8 people, and had driven 40 minutes to be here on a Saturday morning. She had known, walking in, that this was not a meeting where anyone was going to give her anything. She had known it the same way she always knew, the way you learn to know certain things after enough years in the same family. Howard laid out the first folder in front of Leon. The family home on Clover Street, 3 bedrooms, a finished basement, the detached garage, and the half-acre lot, would transfer to Leon as the oldest son. Along with it went the hardware store on Millbrook Road that Frank had run for 30 years, the building, the inventory, the accounts, the 2 delivery trucks. Frank's reasoning, stated plainly, was that Leon had worked weekends at the hardware store since he was 16, and that the home and the business should stay together in the oldest child's hands. Leon picked up the property survey and studied it. He asked about the back fence line. Howard explained. Cassie asked whether the second delivery truck had been recently serviced. Frank nodded. Then Howard pushed the second folder toward Randall. The rental duplex on Fenner Avenue, 2 units, both currently occupied, would transfer to Randall. The vacant lot on the edge of the property, half a block away, would also go to him. Frank said Randall could build on the lot eventually or sell it when the time was right. The duplex brought in monthly income. It was, Frank said, a foundation. Randall turned to the last page and asked when the current leases expired. Howard answered. Kim wrote something on her phone. Diana waited. When both folders had been reviewed and Howard had answered every question, Frank folded his hands on the table and looked at his daughter. Diana, he said, you already have your own business and your own home. You and Craig built that yourselves, and that's yours. What we have here belongs to this family's name. Your brothers are the ones staying local, keeping the store going, managing the property. It wouldn't make sense to divide it. Diana heard the whole thing. She picked up the glass of water in front of her and took one slow drink before setting it back down. So there's no share for me, she said. You're not being left with nothing, Alma said softly. You have so much already. Howard slid a single sheet across the table. It was an acknowledgement form. It stated that Diana had been fully informed of the voluntary property transfers to her brothers, that she accepted the decision, and that she waived any right to contest it. Her name appeared only on the signature line at the bottom. Diana read it twice. She thought about the $4,100 she had wired to Randall 2 years ago when his car needed a new transmission and he was between jobs. She thought about the $6,000 she had contributed toward the hardware store's new shelving system. When Leon said the business was struggling to look competitive, neither of them had ever paid her back. Neither of them had ever been asked to. She picked up the pen and signed. Her handwriting was the same as it always was, clear and unhurried. Howard collected the form. The mood in the room eased immediately. Leon and Cassie began talking about whether the garage could be converted into additional retail space. Randall asked Frank how much the vacant lot was currently assessed for. Then Frank looked at Diana again. We've also decided that your mother and I will be moving in with you and Craig. Diana set the pen down. What did you say? We're getting older. It makes more sense for us to be in town, close to the hospital and the specialists. Your house has the extra room, and Craig's hours are more predictable than your brother's. Diana looked at Leon. You just received the family home and the hardware store. Why can't they stay there? Leon waved a hand. The store keeps me tied up 6 days a week. Cassie and I are trying to get the basement finished for the kids. It's not a good setup right now. Randall. Diana looked at her other brother. Randall leaned back. Our apartment is 2 bedrooms. There's nowhere to put them. You own a duplex. The units are occupied. Then one of them becomes available when a lease ends. Randall looked at the table. Diana turned back to her father. A few minutes ago, you said I was doing well, and that's why I don't need a share of the property. Now you're saying I should take both of you in because I'm doing well. Which one is it? Frank's jaw tightened. You're our child. Taking care of your parents isn't a transaction. I agree. That's why I'm asking what Leon and Randall plan to contribute. If I bring you and Mom into my house, who handles the medical appointments? Who covers costs? Who comes when something happens in the middle of the night? The room was quiet. Randall said they would help when needed. Diana asked what that meant specifically. No one answered. I'll say it plainly, Diana said. I'm not taking Mom and Dad in as a substitute for my brothers. If this is a responsibility for 4 people, then 4 people carry it. I'll do my share. I won't do all of it. Frank raised his voice. The folders shifted on the table. He said she was selfish. He said she had always thought only of herself and her shop. He said a daughter who calculated everything when it came to her own parents was no daughter at all. Diana did not raise her voice back. She waited until he finished. I'll be in touch with you and Leon and Randall about a schedule, she said. She said goodbye to her mother, picked up her bag and walked out. Craig was in the kitchen when she got home. He took one look at her face and poured her a glass of iced tea without asking anything first. She sat at the counter and told him everything. He listened without interrupting, and when she was done, he said, "Whatever you decide, I'm with you." She appreciated that he didn't tell her to be the bigger person. What happened next was not what any of them had planned. Leon told Frank and Alma they were welcome to stay in the house on Clover Street. After all, it was still their home, at least in spirit. Cassie had the downstairs guest room made up. Frank and Alma moved in with 2 bags and a box of kitchen items they didn't want to leave behind. 3 weeks later, Diana got a call from Alma. It was a Thursday morning. The shop was loading a van for a corporate event downtown, and Diana was checking the arrangement count against the order sheet when her mother's name came up on her screen. She stepped into the back room to answer. Alma's voice was quieter than usual. She said she was fine. She said she just wanted to talk. But she paused too long between sentences, and Diana knew that meant something had happened that she was choosing her words around. Mom, what's going on? It came out slowly. Cassie and Leon had decided to finish the basement renovations sooner than expected. The contractor was starting Monday. There would be noise, dust, workers coming in and out. Cassie had suggested gently but clearly that it might be easier for Frank and Alma to stay in the back bedroom, the one off the laundry room, during construction. It would be quieter there, she said, more private. Diana knew the room. It was where Frank used to store off-season inventory from the hardware store. It had one small window that faced the fence. Have you told Leon this isn't okay? Diana asked. He's very busy with the store, Alma said. Diana called Leon that afternoon. He said it was temporary. He said the back room was perfectly comfortable. He said their mother was being dramatic. Diana drove over that weekend. She brought Alma's blood pressure refill and a rotisserie chicken because she knew Frank would eat whatever was in front of him without noticing whether Alma had cooked or not. The back room smelled like cardboard and machine oil. There was a portable fan on the floor and a folding table they were using as a nightstand. Alma's medication bottles were lined up along the windowsill because there was nowhere else to put them. Frank sat on the edge of the bed with his arms crossed, looking at the wall. He did not acknowledge Diana when she came in. That was his way of being ashamed without saying so. I'm not taking you home with me, Diana said before either of them could ask. But you can't stay in this room. I'm going to find you a place. She called Randall on the way to her car. Randall said he understood, but his hands were tied. One of the duplex units had a lease that ran another 4 months. The other tenant had just renewed. He couldn't put his parents out on the street, he said, meaning he couldn't put his tenants out. I'm not asking you to, Diana said. I'm asking you to pay your share of getting them a rental near the clinic on Barton Street. I'll handle the search. The 4 of us split the monthly cost. Randall said that sounded reasonable. He'd have to look at what he had available that month. How much? Diana asked. He gave her a number that was less than a quarter of what she had in mind. That's not a quarter, she said. Things are tight right now, Diana. She didn't argue. She found a small house on a quiet block 8 minutes from the Barton Street clinic. 1 bedroom, a wide bathroom doorway, no steps at the front entrance, The landlord was an older woman who had cared for her own parents in the same house and had installed grab bars in the bathroom herself. Diana paid the deposit out of her own account and sent the payment breakdown to her brother's phones in a text message. Total cost, divided 4 ways, due by the 15th. She included the landlord's direct payment information and wrote, clearly, that no one was to send money to her. It went to the landlord or not at all. Leon read the message and didn't reply for 2 days. When he did, he said the split seemed fair. Randall said he'd get his share in by the 18th. Diana wrote back, 15th. He paid on the 16th. Frank and Alma moved into the Barton Street house on a Wednesday. Diana came with Craig and their 2 daughters to help carry boxes. Alma walked slowly through each room, running her hand along the wall near the bathroom doorway, testing whether there was enough space. Frank stood in the kitchen and looked out the window at the small yard and said nothing. Before Diana left that evening, Alma caught her hand near the front door. "Are you still angry?" Alma asked. Diana thought about the honest answer. "I'm not angry," she said, "but I'm also not going to pretend the last few months didn't happen." Alma nodded. She let go of Diana's hand. Alma fell in the kitchen 6 weeks later. It wasn't serious, a bruised hip, no fracture, but Frank had called Leon first, then Randall, and both of them had taken over 2 hours to get there. Diana had been 40 minutes away at a venue walkthrough when Frank finally called her. She arrived before either brother. Alma was sitting on the kitchen floor, with her back against the cabinet, waiting. She hadn't cried. She was practical in that way, always had been. She asked Diana if the chicken on the counter needed to go back in the refrigerator. Diana helped her up, got her settled in the chair, and checked the bruise. Then she called the brothers. "We need a schedule," she said when she had both of them on a group call, written, signed. "Each person commits to a day or a financial contribution. I'm not doing this by feel anymore." Leon said they were family, not a corporation. Diana said, "Leon, I was on the floor beside Mom before either of you got here. Don't talk to me about family." She brought a printed schedule to the Barton Street house the following Saturday. She had spent 2 evenings making it at her desk after the girls went to sleep. It laid out each week across a grid. Spaces for who covered transportation to appointments. Spaces for who handled the grocery run. A line for monthly financial contributions from each of the 4 children, with the amount calculated from actual costs rather than what felt convenient. Frank looked at it for a long time. "This is how you treat your parents," he said. "Like a business?" "This is how I make sure Mom is actually taken care of," Diana said. "When it was written down at the property meeting, you wanted every detail clear, which fence line belonged to which lot, which truck was included in which transfer. This is the same thing." She set a pen on the table. Leon signed first, because he wanted it to be over. Randall argued about 2 of the line items, got one of them changed by $20 a month, and then signed. Frank looked at the 3 signatures and, after a long pause, pressed his own name onto the page. Not because he agreed with all of it, but because, Diana thought, he finally understood that the alternative was watching his daughter carry everything alone, while his son stood at a distance and called that love. Diana photographed each page and sent it to the family group chat. 3 months passed. The schedule held better than Diana had expected, and worse than she had hoped. Randall came through consistently on his financial contribution. His days, though, the ones where he was supposed to sit with Alma or take Frank to his cardiology follow-up, he often showed up late or sent Kim in his place without asking first. Leon did less than the minimum. He transferred the money on time because Diana had tied the payment to a direct auto reminder from the landlord, and so there was no way to quietly not do it. But his in-person days were full of interruptions. His phone would ring, a delivery would come in, he would stay for 40 minutes and leave. His name was on the schedule. It was visible every time anyone looked at the chart. That was, Diana decided, the best she was going to get from him, and she accepted it without wasting energy on anger. One afternoon, Diana came to bring Alma a new pair of non-slip house shoes and found her mother sitting on the bed with a cardboard shoebox on her lap. Alma looked up when Diana came in. She seemed to have been waiting. "Sit down," Alma said. Diana pulled the chair over. Alma opened the box. Inside, wrapped in an old piece of linen, was a spiral-bound portfolio book, the kind used in design programs, with a black cover and a clear sleeve on the front. Diana recognized it immediately. She had made that portfolio when she was 19, when she was saving up to apply to the design program at the community college extension. She had spent months putting it together. photographs of flower arrangements she had made for neighbors, hand-drawn sketches of color palettes and centerpiece proportions, notes on flower varieties she had studied from library books. She had brought it home to show her parents the night before she was going to submit the application. Frank had told her that flowers were a hobby and that investing in a design program was a waste of money she didn't have. The following week, he sold her professional floral kit, the one she had saved 2 years to buy, to cover a repair bill on the delivery truck Leon was using for the hardware store at the time. He told her the truck kept the family fed and that she would thank him later. She never did apply. She moved in with Craig the following year and started working in a grocery store floral department, teaching herself everything Arya, her old teacher, had told her she could learn. The portfolio had disappeared. She had assumed her father had thrown it out. "Where did you get this?" Diana said. Alma's hands rested on the cover. "I went through the recycling after he put it there. I kept it in the cedar chest." Diana opened the portfolio slowly. The photographs were faded at the edges. Her 19-year-old handwriting was on every caption, precise, slightly cramped, the way it still was today when she was thinking carefully. One sketch was of a tiered centerpiece she had never actually built, but had designed entirely in her head on a slow afternoon. There was a sticky note in Alma's handwriting clipped to that page. It said simply, "This one is beautiful." Diana looked at her mother. "You never told me," Diana said. "You kept all of this and you never told me." Alma looked down at her hands. The weakness on the right side, the one the doctor said was an old injury that had never fully healed, made her movements slower than usual. "I was afraid of what your father would say." "I know," Diana said. She did know. She had always known, on some level, that her mother saw her differently than her father did. The way Alma would pause when Diana described a new arrangement she was working on. Not to change the subject, but to listen. The way she had kept every newspaper clipping from the one time a local lifestyle piece mentioned Bloom and Gather in a sentence. Diana had found 3 copies of it in the Barton Street kitchen drawer. Alma said she had picked them up from different neighbors. "Knowing doesn't fix the years," Diana said. Alma's eyes went red at the corners. She did not argue with that. Diana closed the portfolio gently and set it back in the box. She did not take it with her when she left. She left it on Alma's nightstand where Alma could see it. 8 months after the schedule was signed, Alma had a mild stroke. It was Randall who called Diana at 5 in the morning. His voice was steadier than she would have expected. He said Frank had found Alma on the floor near the bathroom, her left arm not responding. Randall had already called an ambulance, had ridden with them to the hospital, and had been sitting in the waiting room for an hour before he called his siblings. Diana was at the hospital within 40 minutes. Leon arrived an hour after her. Randall had already spoken with the attending physician. He had the intake forms completed and a handwritten summary of Alma's medications on his phone. When Diana came through the door, he handed her the summary without being asked. This was not what she had expected from him. At some point during the second hour of waiting, Randall sat down next to her in the hallway and said, "I know I've missed shifts. I know the money has been late sometimes." Diana looked at her hands. "I kept thinking it would balance out eventually," he said. "That if I just didn't make a big deal about the hard parts, you'd do the same. It didn't really work, did it?" "No," Diana said, "it didn't." He was quiet for a while. Then he said, "The duplex is losing money. One tenant moved out in January. The other one's 3 months behind. I haven't told anyone." Diana looked at him then. "I thought getting that property meant I had figured something out," he said. "Turns out I just got a building." Diana didn't say she was sorry, and she didn't say she had told him so. She said, "When the time is right, I can help you think through the numbers, but not tonight." He nodded. Alma spent 4 days in the hospital. On the day she was discharged, Diana had already arranged for a home health aide to come 3 mornings a week. She had emailed the updated expense breakdown to both brothers before Alma was even out of the hospital bed. Neither of them pushed back. Frank was changed by those 4 days in a way that was hard to put into words. He had sat beside Alma through most of it, asking nurses questions Diana had never heard him ask before. About medication timing, about how to recognize warning signs, about what the physical therapist meant when she said left side weakness could improve with consistent exercise. One evening Diana arrived and found him moving Alma's left hand in small circles, the way the therapist had demonstrated. He counted quietly under his breath. He did not stop when Diana came in. He only looked up and said, She did 3 sets earlier, this is the fourth. Diana set the grocery bag down on the table and didn't say anything. On a Thursday afternoon, 6 weeks after Alma came home from the hospital, Frank called Diana. Not about a medical appointment or a missing medication or a question about the schedule. He called to tell her that Leon's son had started coming into the hardware store and making changes, rearranging the display floor, bringing in a new point-of-sale system that Frank didn't know how to use, talking to the suppliers directly without telling Frank first. He doesn't ask me, Frank said. He just does it. Diana thought about what to say. That property is Leon's now, she said. What he lets his son do with it is between them. Frank was quiet for a moment. Then he said, I gave it to him because I thought he'd protect it. I know, Diana said. She did not say that she had known. Sitting at that table with the 2 folders, that property alone doesn't create the people who care enough to use it well. She didn't say it because she had already said everything she needed to say a long time ago. The following spring, Diana's older daughter, Nadia, she had taken the name from her grandmother's side, a name that suited her, won the Regional Middle School Award for Visual Arts. She had submitted a series of botanical illustrations, ink drawings of flower structures, so detailed that the judging panel had initially assumed they were professional prints. The school mounted them in the hallway display case near the front office. Diana came to the award ceremony on a Tuesday afternoon in the school gymnasium. Frank came too, moving slowly with his cane but moving. Afterward, Diana's daughter asked if she could have a print of one of the illustrations framed for the shop. Diana said yes before the sentence was finished. She had the largest of them printed and mounted in a simple blonde wood frame with UV-protected glass. She hung it near the entrance of Bloom and Gather, where the morning light came in best. When Frank came to the shop for the first time after that, he stopped in front of the frame for a long time. He read the name on the mat, the full name, her granddaughter's name, printed in small dark letters below the image, and then he looked at Diana. You taught her this? He said. She taught herself, Diana said. I just made sure nobody sold her tools. Frank looked at the illustration again. Diana watched him look at it. She did not elaborate, and he did not ask her to. He put both hands on his cane and was quiet for a long time, and in that quiet, Diana understood that some things don't require a full accounting to be understood. She picked up her order clipboard from the counter and went back to work. The frame stayed on the wall near the entrance, in the brightest spot in the shop. Every person who came through the door could see it. Every person who asked heard whose work it was, and Diana never once put it in a drawer.